She knelt with empty hands, but her soul was overflowing. No one heard what she said, but heaven did. This is the night Hannah wept without words. Welcome to Midnight Psalms, where sacred stories unfold in the quiet hours. Here we listen to the tears, the silence, and the faith that speaks in the dark. It was not the first time she walked toward the temple with a heavy heart, but this time felt different. This time, the silence inside her was louder than the prayers around her. Hannah had smiled for years while bleeding within, had celebrated the victories of others while counting her secret losses, had endured the stings of mockery while whispering hope into her own emptiness. That morning she hadn't slept. Sleep was impossible when your soul trembles with unspoken grief. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders like armor, not to warm her skin, but to hold together a spirit that was quietly breaking. Beside her, Elkanah smiled gently, but even he couldn't touch the depth of what was unraveling within her. The temple was near, but to Hannah, it felt like a battlefield. Her tears weren't new, but something was, a holy desperation that pushed her beyond language, beyond tradition, beyond appearances. She no longer came to fulfill a duty. She came to fight for her life, and for the life she longed to hold. Year after year, Peninnah's words pierced her like knives, subtle, sharp, and always timed when the ache was deepest. "The Lord must favor me," Peninnah would say, her children laughing in the background, unaware of the wounds their joy could leave. Hannah never responded. She absorbed the humiliation like rain on dry soil, every drop carving deeper channels in her soul. But what no one saw was that Hannah wasn't angry at Peninnah. She was confused by God. Why would he allow this? Why was her womb empty while her heart was so full of love she had nowhere to pour? The questions grew louder each night, echoing in her silent bed, her untouched cradle, her unfulfilled dreams. And yet, something in her still believed enough to show up, to kneel, to cry. She didn't know the theology of unanswered prayers. She just knew her pain was real, and that if God was real, he had to meet her in it. She entered the temple like a shadow, quiet, unnoticed, but burning within. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She wasn't trying to impress, wasn't crafting beautiful sentences. She was simply unraveling before God, thread by trembling thread. Each movement of her mouth was a scream only heaven could hear. The priest saw her but misunderstood. He thought she was drunk, as if grief could be measured by decorum. But Hannah didn't stop. She had reached that sacred place beyond shame, where the soul is more honest than the body, and where tears are more fluent than words. Her prayer was not recited. It was released. With each breath, she poured her pain like water until she had nothing left. No clever arguments, no emotional pleas. Just surrender. And somehow, in that emptying, she felt a strange fullness, not in her body but in her faith. Eli approached her, confused and perhaps slightly annoyed, as religious leaders often are when they see brokenness that doesn't fit their expectations. "Put away your wine," he said, failing to recognize the sacredness of her silence. But Hannah looked up, not with offense but with honesty. "I am not drunk," she whispered. "I am pouring out my soul to the Lord." It was the kind of answer only someone acquainted with sorrow could give. Not defensive, not proud, just true. Eli paused. Perhaps for the first time he really saw her. Not just a woman in distress, but a vessel of raw, holy emotion. He blessed her, probably not understanding what had just passed between her and God. But he didn't need to understand. God had already received it. Hannah rose, not pregnant, not yet, but changed. The weight had lifted. The storm had calmed. Her face was no longer downcast, because something sacred had happened in the silence. That night, Hannah didn't cry herself to sleep. She lay in quiet awe, unsure of what would come, but certain of who had heard her. For the first time in years she felt seen, not by people but by God. And that was enough. She didn't ask for a timeline. She didn't demand a sign. She simply rested in the aftermath of divine encounter. Elkanah noticed the change but didn't ask. Some things are too holy for casual conversation. Hannah began to move differently, not with the heaviness of hope deferred, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had been touched by grace. And though her womb was still empty, her soul was not. She waited, not with anxiety but with assurance. She knew that silence, when offered to God, never returns void. It becomes a seed. And Hannah had planted hers in tears. Months passed. Then the moment came, the realization that life was growing where only sorrow had lived before. She placed her hand on her belly, stunned, reverent, undone. The promise had come, not just the child but the proof that God hears even what we cannot say. She named him Samuel, God has heard, and every time she spoke his name, it reminded her of that night, the night when no one understood her but heaven leaned close. She didn't keep Samuel for herself. She had promised him back to the Lord, and when the time came she brought him to the temple not with sadness but with fulfillment. Her sacrifice was not a loss, it was a legacy. The same lips that once quivered with wordless grief now sang with uncontainable praise. Her silence had birthed a prophet. But the story wasn't just about the child. It was about the woman who chose to believe before she received, who found strength not in having her desire met, but in placing her desire before God's feet. Hannah's tears were not wasted. They became rivers of testimony, flowing through generations. Her cry became a melody, a holy echo that still sings today. And her story tells every weary soul, your silence is not empty, your tears are not invisible. God reads prayers the human eye can't detect. He decodes the language of pain and responds with mercy that transcends timing. Hannah's strength wasn't in what she got, but in how she trusted. And that trust changed everything. Even now, in late hours when the world sleeps and hearts ache in secret, her story speaks. It reminds us that there is a place for unfiltered grief, that the temple is not a stage but a sanctuary, and that God is not offended by emotions, He's moved by them. Hannah never prayed to impress. She prayed to survive. And in doing so, she showed us how to meet God in the rawest places of our humanity. She is not just a mother of a prophet. She is a prophet of faith itself, declaring through her tears that God is near to the brokenhearted. If you've ever felt like your voice was too weak, your pain too private, your hope too distant, Hannah's story is your mirror. It tells you that unseen doesn't mean unheard, and delayed doesn't mean denied. Her night of weeping without words became the beginning of generational impact. She didn't just receive a child. She redefined how we see prayer, how we handle pain, and how we approach the sacred. Her silence shouted a truth louder than sermons, that God does not need eloquence to respond. He just needs honesty. And when we give Him that, miracles begin in places we thought were permanently barren. If you are enjoying this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help this channel reach more people. Now let's continue. There is something sacred about a woman who refuses to let bitterness win. Hannah could have closed her heart, turned her pain into poison, used silence as a wall instead of a prayer. But she chose the opposite. She let her ache become a bridge between her and the divine. That night in Shiloh was not about a miracle child, it was about a miracle of trust. A woman choosing faith in the dark before any sign appeared. Her strength was not loud. It was quiet, persistent, like water carving stone. She didn't curse God, she approached Him. Not because she understood everything but because she believed He could hold everything. Her brokenness did not disqualify her. It qualified her for a deeper kind of encounter, one that bypassed formulas and rituals and went straight to the heart of heaven. When we picture prayer, we often imagine calm voices, poetic language, gentle background music. But real prayer is messy. It's the shaking hands, the red eyes, the stuttering breath when you've cried too hard to speak. It's what Hannah showed us, that when your soul is overwhelmed, the most honest prayer may look like silence. Her lips moved but no sound came, yet God heard every sentence hidden in her sobs. This wasn't weakness. It was spiritual depth. Because prayer isn't about volume. It's about vulnerability. And Hannah's vulnerability made room for a divine answer. When we stop performing and start pouring, heaven responds. God does not wait for us to be polished, He meets us in the raw. It's easy to look at Hannah's story as a one-time miracle. But her impact didn't end when Samuel was born. In fact, it had just begun. Samuel would become one of Israel's greatest prophets, a voice of clarity in a time of chaos. And every time he spoke, he echoed the silent prayer that birthed him. Hannah's surrender shaped history. Her tears nurtured a prophet. Her honesty opened a new spiritual era. And this is the unseen beauty of silent suffering. It doesn't just change us, it changes others. Sometimes your deepest heartbreak becomes someone else's breakthrough. Hannah wasn't just blessed. She became a blessing. And the world felt the ripple effect of a moment she thought no one saw. When Hannah handed Samuel over to Eli, she didn't hesitate. She didn't cry from loss. She rejoiced. Not because she was giving up, but because she was giving back. She understood something most people miss, that the gift God gives is always safer in His hands than in ours. She trusted God not just for the miracle, but with the miracle. That takes another level of faith. She didn't idolize the promise. She worshiped the promise giver. And that's why her joy remained even as she let go. Because joy isn't rooted in possession, it's rooted in purpose. Hannah's story teaches us how to receive, how to release, and how to rest in the rhythm of divine timing. And then she sang. Not just a song of praise but a declaration. "My heart rejoices in the Lord," she began, a woman who once could barely whisper now bursting with spiritual fire. Her song wasn't for show. It was prophecy wrapped in poetry. She declared the reversal of fortunes, the power of the humble, the downfall of the arrogant. She wasn't just grateful. She was awakened. Her pain had given her spiritual sight. And this is what God often does. He turns the weeping woman into a warrior. The same voice that once trembled with grief now roared with insight. Her silence had prepared the ground for revelation. And now her song would echo through centuries. Every detail in Hannah's story feels familiar to the quiet sufferer. The misunderstood motives. The private anguish. The desire for something holy and good that seems to stay out of reach. But in that aching tension, God did his finest work. He showed that divine intervention doesn't always look like lightning. Sometimes, it looks like a woman on her knees. Not performing. Not complaining. Just being real. That kind of rawness is magnetic to the divine. Because when we strip everything away, our pride, our timing, our image, all that's left is the heart. And that's what God listens for. Not perfect sentences. Just sincere surrender. That's what he saw in Hannah. And that's what he still responds to today. Hannah's legacy is not defined by what she endured, but by how she responded. She didn't let sorrow sculpt her identity. She let it deepen her intimacy with God. And that's where everything changed. Her story isn't about infertility, it's about faith. Not about delay, but devotion. It's a reminder that God's silence is not rejection. It's invitation. Invitation to go deeper. To press in. To let the ache become an altar. And when we do, like Hannah, we discover that even when nothing changes on the outside, everything shifts within. Peace comes. Assurance arrives. And somehow that's enough to carry us through. There's a reason why God included Hannah's story in Scripture. Not just to show what he did, but to remind us what he still does. He still hears. He still sees. He still moves in response to unseen prayers. And in a world that celebrates loud success, Hannah reminds us of the quiet victories. The ones that happen in secret. In prayer closets. In whispered worship. In tear-stained pillows. Those are the places where heaven bends down. Not to judge, but to join. And that's the beauty of Hannah's night. It didn't end in darkness. It ended in destiny. Because silence, when offered to God, never stays empty. So if you find yourself in a Hannah moment, surrounded by others but still aching in solitude, know this: you are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. Your story is still unfolding. And even if no one else hears your silent cries, God does. Just like he heard her. Just like he answered. Your voice matters even when it's silent. Your faith counts even when it trembles. And your future is not determined by what you lack, but by what you lay at his feet. Hannah didn't change God's mind, she aligned with his heart. And when that happened, everything else followed. In the end, Hannah's story is not a lesson in how to pray harder or want more. It's a whisper to the soul: be real with God. Bring him the messy parts, the silent nights, the questions you're too afraid to ask out loud. He welcomes it all. He reads between the sobs. And he writes redemption into every chapter. Her journey started with weeping, but it ended in worship. And yours can too. Keep showing up. Keep kneeling. Keep believing. Even when no words come. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in faith begin with nothing more than a woman weeping, without words. If this story met you in a quiet place, share it with someone who's been praying in silence. And if your soul has ever wept like Hannah's, know that Midnight Psalms is a place where your quiet cries are heard. Subscribe and journey with us through the sacred echoes of faith after dark.